The night was full of whispers. Not the kind you hear from people, but from the trees, the wind, and the shadows. I remember it well. I was sitting under the old baobab tree, staring at the moon, and everything around me seemed alive, like the whole village was breathing with me. But something felt off. It was like the air carried a weight, a cold heaviness that settled in my chest. My heart raced, but I didn't know why. Then I heard it, a low humming sound, coming from the edge of the forest. It wasn't a song, not really. It was something darker, like the earth itself was groaning. I should have gone home. My mother always told me, never stay out past the sun's last light. The night has eyes. But that night, I stayed. I was 17 and foolish. I wasn't afraid of shadows. At least, not until that moment. As I stood to leave, I saw her. A woman, standing by the edge of the trees, her skin dark like the deepest part of the night. She didn't look at me, but I felt her eyes on me, cold and sharp like a blade. Her dress was tattered, and her feet were bare, covered in dirt. But what caught me most was her smile, a slow, crooked grin that spread across her face like a crack in the earth. My legs wouldn't move. I wanted to run, but something in me kept me there, glued to the ground. She started to walk toward me, slow and deliberate, her eyes locked on mine now. And then I noticed it, a mark on her arm, like a burn, shaped like a twisted snake coiling around her skin. It was glowing, pulsing with an eerie red light. "Do you hear it?" she whispered when she got close enough, her voice soft, like silk brushing against stone. "Hear what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The hum," she said. "It's for you." I didn't understand, but my heart sank. Something in her voice told me that my life had just shifted, like the earth beneath me had cracked open, and there was no going back. Before I could speak again, she reached out, her hand icy cold as it touched my face. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my bones. "You've been marked," she said, her smile widening. "He will come for you now." My breath caught in my throat, and then she was gone, fading into the shadows like smoke. I ran. My feet hit the dirt path hard, and my lungs burned with every breath. But even as I raced home, the hum stayed with me, buzzing in my ears, in my head, in my chest. That was the night my life changed, the night I was marked. The night he started watching me. After that night, sleep was no longer safe. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back under the baobab tree. The moon was always full, hanging heavy in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the ground. And she was always there, the woman with the mark. But in the dreams, she wasn't alone. He was there too. I couldn't see his face. He stayed in the shadows, lurking just out of sight, but I could feel him. His presence was heavy, suffocating, like being buried under thick, wet earth. The air around him seemed colder, darker. And every time he moved, the hum returned, filling the space between us. "Who are you?" I would ask, but he never answered. He just watched, silent and still. Each dream was the same. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The hum would linger for hours after, buzzing in my skull like an insect trapped in a jar. I told no one about the dreams. Not my mother, not my sister, not even my best friend, Amina. How could I? What would I say? That a woman from the forest had marked me, and now a shadow was haunting my sleep. They'd think I was mad. But I wasn't mad. I knew that much. The dreams were too real. The fear too sharp. And then, I started seeing him when I was awake. It was small things at first, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, the feeling of being watched when I was alone. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone standing behind me, but there was never anyone there. Just the hum, growing louder, closer. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The mark had changed something. And it wasn't done with me yet. It was a week after the marking when he finally appeared. I was walking back from the market, a basket of yams balanced on my hip, when I felt it, the cold chill of his presence. My heart skipped, and I stopped in the middle of the path, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, I turned. He stood at the far end of the road, half hidden in the shadows of a mango tree. Tall, too tall, with broad shoulders and long limbs that seemed to stretch impossibly far. His face was obscured, but his eyes were glowing. Not with light, but with a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow everything around it. The hum returned, louder now, vibrating through the air like the beat of a distant drum. My hands tightened on the basket, my knuckles white. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum. He didn't answer, just tilted his head slightly, as if studying me. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, the shadows moving with him, clinging to his body like smoke. My feet were frozen to the ground. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there and wait for him to reach me. But I couldn't move. He stopped a few feet away, his face still hidden, but his eyes never leaving mine. "You've been marked," he said, his voice low and rough, like stones grinding together. "I don't know what that means," I said, my voice shaking. He smiled then, a slow, twisted smile that made my skin crawl. "You will." And just like that, he was gone, fading into the shadows as if he had never been there at all. The next day, I woke up with the mark. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. Twisting and curling around my wrist like a snake, just like the woman's. A dark red burn that pulsed with the same eerie light. Panic shot through me. I scrubbed at it with soap and water, but it wouldn't come off. I scratched at it until my skin was raw, but the mark stayed, glowing brighter with every passing second. That's when I knew. There was no escaping it. Whatever curse had been placed on me, it was real. And it was only just beginning.